So I'm curious if you have ever been working in a translation environment, probably with church-based Bible translators, and you've encountered a lack of resources, say biblical resources or translation resources. Could you just put a hand up? Have you experienced that? Well, that's going to make this talk a lot more interesting. The cool thing about the translation resource ecosystem is that its entire design, its entire purpose, is to make those obstacles a thing of the past. So the objective of the translation resource ecosystem is to equip global church translators with the biblical and translation resources they need to achieve excellence in Bible translation. Their stated goal is to produce translations in their own languages that are not just trustworthy, but that they know are trustworthy. And those are two very important things that come together. The TRE, as we call it, is intended to equip them to do exactly that. So for that to happen, there are 4 questions that we're trying to ask and then provide good answers for. The first is, what biblical translation and translational resources are needed? What does the church actually need? The second is, in which languages are resources needed? We know that the global church is not working from English in most of their translation work. English is an important language, but what other languages are also in play? Third, how do we maximize the reach of these resources? So if we consider the need to get resources outside of English into other languages as solving the language obstacle, what other things need to be addressed in order for us to ensure that everyone gets access to these resources with the least amount of friction? So open licenses is a necessity in this regard, but there are other things as well. We need to think through the technical architecture, the design of the resources, how they work together, and then how do we distribute this widely and broadly so everyone who wants it can get access to it. And then finally, how do we collaborate together to provide these resources as soon as possible? Another show of hands, how many of you have seen this diagram before? Is this something that's at least somewhat familiar to some of us? Okay, great. This is, I'm going to introduce you to the 5 functions of the translation resource ecosystem. This is the first, or part of the first. This is the plan function. So when we say what resources are needed and in which languages are they needed, we need to get some sense of where are we even trying to go with this. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this just yet, but just to summarize it, you'll note, if you spend any time on this, that we are defining resource types. And these include things like source texts and lexical resources and translation guides and exegetical notes and so on. The idea is to describe them functionally so that we can meet those needs in a variety of ways given the contextual realities in each given scenario. But then you'll also notice that it's something of a long tail in that there's about 150 major strategic languages, we would say languages of wider communication, in use around the world, but not all of those are equal in how they are used, the number of users, number of speakers. For example, let me contrast, we're all familiar with major world languages like Spanish and Russian and French and Arabic and a handful of other languages, each one with hundreds of millions of speakers and a long literate tradition. And then you contrast that with languages that are more toward the end of some of them are oral only, don't even have a writing system. They're a marketplace language. And some of these, I think in French West Africa, there are several in other regions of the world. We're recognizing that all of these languages need foundational resources, probably in multimedia formats. And then of those 150, about 70 or so are going to need more robust resources on top of that. Another 30 are going to need significant resources on top of that. And then about 10 are going to need what we're calling full stack resources. So think fully aligned to the Greek and the Hebrew, deeply interconnected with semantic lexicons and exegetical commentaries, the kinds of resources that we would be familiar with in English. So let me also, if you're interested, let me put that on the screen. If you scan that, that will take you to, you can also see the website there. This is just our current landing page for that diagram that you saw, what we call the Strategic Languages Initiative. You'll also note, if you go there, that we are showing draft 9, and we are probably days away from draft 10. This is an active research project. A lot of it is based on what we all know to be true in terms of the kinds of resources needed. If you don't have a good source text, you're going to really struggle in doing a good translation. Some things are self-evident. Others are backstopped by a considerable amount of research that has been done, and the way to the future is connecting with leaders in their own context and hearing from them what actually works, what actually is needed. So we expect this project, this research project, to continue to improve over time. It is an open invitation for any and all of us who want to be a part of that. If you have information that would help us clarify and make that plan even more accurate, we would love to hear it. So please contact us if you do. So I mentioned the 5 functions of the TRE, specifically building out the translation resource ecosystem. And as I mentioned, the first is we need to have a plan. So one thing to note about the Strategic Languages Initiative is that that's only defining the minimum that research suggests and reports suggest are needed for the church to achieve excellence in Bible translation, back to our stated purpose. It's not the maximum. The expectation is that the provision of open license biblical and translational resources will be immensely catalytic in that it is going to catalyze more and more resources to be created in these languages. That's actually intentional. That's part of the hope here. So we set a plan, and we're going to, again, refine that as needed over time. Then the second function then is find, and that speaks to the reality that in the last few years there are more and more people, more and more entities who are creating biblical and translation resources, releasing them under open licenses in multiple languages. A few years back, you had to look long and hard to find anyone moving in this space, and now it's very exciting to see the progress that's being made. So the find function is identifying where are these resources, who's created them, and then that connects up to the next function, which is link. How do we make all of these resources work together? So we could find all kinds of resources, and we've got some Word documents here and some USFM files here and some other resources here, and they're just a stack of resources. We really want to make those work together, to interconnect them so that they work more like, think of a digital study environment. So that's the linking function. Then we get to sharing. How do we massively share this so that everyone who wants access to this can have access to it? And again, this is just very, very high level. If you want to find out more, we would love to tell you more about the plans for all of this. Then the last piece is complete. So based on the plan that we've identified, the things that we've already found and caused to work together, how do we complete the remaining needs? How do we connect with contributors, translators, church networks, publishers, those who can provide the resources and create the translations to fill in the missing gaps? So those are the 5 functions we're working toward in building the TRE. And along those lines, we do have a request. We have been looking long and hard for 2 resources that are of really high value for this resource ecosystem. And to date, we have not been able to find them. These are ones that exist, and some owners, if they were so inclined, could in fact make them available under an open license and immediately meet the need that we have. So we wanted to surface this here as just a warm invitation to helping us solve this problem, to meet this need for the entire global church. The first is an English Bible translation. On the screen it says a daily reader translation. You could also think of it as an English as a second language register. So a form of English, a register of English that is as comprehensible as possible to second language speakers of English. Those are, after all, the vast majority of people who will be using English resources in Bible translation. It may not be their mother tongue. The second is the Greek and Hebrew semantic lexicon. Now, there are various of these, and I won't go into detail on why semantic lexicons are so incredibly valuable for mother tongue translators, for church-based Bible translators, but they really are. And this is an urgent need. Again, if you have ideas about how we could meet these needs, we would love to hear that. And finally, I really want to extend a heartfelt thank you, gratitude to the many of you who are already moving in this space, providing everything from Bible translations themselves to exegetical resources, and there is a growing network of contributors who are part of this provision of these resources to the entire global church. It is really exciting. And I am really excited that, and I don't want to steal anyone's thunder, but tomorrow from this stage, will be an announcement from the president of a major Christian publisher about their intentional move into the free and open world. And the list of resources that they are intending to make available under an open license is jaw-dropping, in my opinion. So I am very excited for that to happen tomorrow. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your support of the lab and the translation resource ecosystem. At this point, I will hand it over to my colleague, Andy Kellogg. Thanks.